Hey everyone, welcome back to the Quest for the Bestest. It's the podcast where us four backlog boys are trying to figure out what the very best Picture winner of all time is. And this week, we're talking about How Green Was My Valley from 1941, directed by John Ford, someone you might have heard of, usually famous for Western films. But this one, not exactly a Western film at all, maybe other than that it takes place in the westernmost portion of the British Isle. But we're going to talk about it. We're going to get into all of the details about How Green Was My Valley, maybe try to answer that question posed there in the title. But first, got a little housekeeping to do because last week we left our decision, we abdicated the throne and gave it into the viewers' hands as to whether or not The Shape of Water would go above American Beauty. And the votes have come in along with some interesting analysis. Phil Wood, longtime commenter from long time ago, has reappeared.
Phil Wood.
Yes, he has reappeared in our comments and did some math, did some analysis, and figured that in just about any way of calculating it, American Beauty wins.
That's enough for us.
And that's enough for us, as well as we got some other people who decided that American Beauty should go on top. So the list as it stands now, in number 10th place, American Beauty. And then at number 11th, the most recent film on the list, The Shape of Water, with an average score of 9.0. Just almost got into the top 10 of our list, you know, given it's quite long, number 11 is quite the feat. So if you missed that episode, I highly recommend going and checking it out. It's a good one. A recent movie. Most people have at least some opinions about it, so you can go and absorb ours. All right. I want to hear a featured comment from someone new this week. Tanner, you've got it ready to go, right?
Indeed, I do. Speaking of opinions on the film, The Shape of Water, we have one from our classic friend of the show, John Tour 11, who says, "This was a great year for Best Picture nominees, and I liked most of them. Same here. And I was very happy when this won. This is such a refreshing addition to the Best Picture winners. Rewatching it, it was great. This feels like an exquisite art piece, and the whole film is very warm and feel-good throughout." I agree with that as well. I do wish there was some more emotional punch to it though. In the end, it just feels ... very good. I'd say 8.8 out of 10 for this, and is below American Beauty, I'm afraid. And I can't argue with Phil Wood's arguments either. Nor can most. Phil Wood bringing out the facts and numbers.
Oh yeah,
into the comments.
He totally owned us with epic facts and logic.
Absolutely, he did, and we welcome it. Speaking of owning us, I'd like to give a little not a shout out, but I received a comment from one Mr. Art Bagley on an old episode. That I'm not going to read out because it's making fun of me. But to Mr. Art Bagley, if you're watching, I say, my bad, I will familiarize myself with the entirety of world history before watching another film.
Well, you're going to see Jackass Forever tonight, so you better get cracking.
Oh, no.
You're going to really need that historical context for that one. Mm-hmm. All right, Tucker, I believe that a plot synopsis is in order before we get started, because this film, do you think it has like a standard 3-act plot? Or what does all fit in there with what is going on narratively here?
Yeah, it's interesting that it's usually Abram and I who does the featured comment, but this week I wanted to hand it off to Turn Dykstra, not only to spice it up a little bit, give him a chance to shine in the radiant being that he is, but also to give me a chance to give a plot synopsis of this film, because we kind of dropped off of doing a plot synopsis. It's probably been like half a year since we did a plot synopsis. But I wanted to talk about this film's plot, or just give a little basis, because it's not one that I feel a lot of people, especially our age, would be particularly familiar with. You might have heard the name, you've heard the name John Ford, but the story of How Green Was My Valley, not something that is as iconic as the rest of that. So the story of How Green Was My Valley follows the Morgan family, particularly Hugh Morgan, the youngest member of the Morgan clan, who live in a small Welsh village that is dominated by the coal industry. And the coal industry starts taking over, and they're not getting paid enough, and so unions are formed, and some of the boys lose their jobs, and then the coal industry just keeps taking over more and more, and the kids leave, and the family splits up, and the little boy gets beat up, and everyone starts getting sick, and some people die, and yeah, it just goes downhill. But the idea is focusing on this family and how the coal industry has impacted their lives, and then the film ends.
That's pretty much it. I think that was a good description. There's a lot of detail. The film's just about 2 hours long, and so you get into this the family drama and the family relationships centered around Hugh and the father. At times, I think there's a bit of a shift between who is the focus of the film. Maybe about halfway through, but yeah, that's I thank you for that, Tucker. Now let's go around the horn. What did you guys think of that whole plot and the whole film as a whole?
Tucker, I don't blame you for sort of petering out with your plot synopsis at the end, because this film sort of does peter out, I feel like. We start off fairly interesting. We have, like Tucker said, a town in Wales dominated by the coal industry. They are underpaying their workers, so the younger lads of the Morgan family try to establish a union. Their father is against said union, and it seems like a very interesting setup premise for a film. But then it doesn't really follow any one particular plot line. It instead goes for a scattershot sort of approach, in giving us a sort of a plethora of little vignettes from the Morgan family scrapbook, a little history of what happens in I don't know, maybe a year-ish, a couple months, half a year, I don't know, who's to say. And I don't think it works, quite frankly. I think this film really has a lack of focus. If I can really relate it to a recent film, one that we might be talking about once we get into this year's Best Picture nominees, I'd relate it to the film Licorice Pizza, which is a film that doesn't have a hardline plot. It is a lot of little vignettes starring all these characters. But at least in that film, I like the main leads are charismatic enough to carry me through all these little stories. That's not the case here. The kid who plays Hugh, Tucker, do you have his name there?
Yeah, his name is Roddy McDowall. Roddy
McDowall is fine. He's cute sometimes. He's annoying others. He's about as good as I can ask for a child actor of this era. But yeah, no one in this movie exactly has the charisma. Not even Walter Pidgeon has the charisma to carry this film through its sort of meandering, focusless story.
Aben Buhner?
I don't think it comes as any great surprise that I did not like How Green Was My Valley. To me, this felt like just under 2 hours of like the inciting incident for a Charles Dickens novel, because it's a lot of context. It's here's to town, here are the people, but there are so many people. We don't really have anybody to latch onto, but we have a lot of childhood trauma. Oh, I fell into a river and now I can't walk for many months. Oh, I'm getting beat up at school. Oh, my dad died in the coal mine. It really feels like I'm beginning to read Oliver Twist and there's 500 more pages of book after it. But actually there isn't, because the movie just ends. I agree with Tanner completely. The movie is meandering, and I think it's also completely unrelatable. Not just because I'm not a young Welsh boy living in a mining town, but because I do not think that there are any characters here to latch onto. There are many characters in this movie, but I don't think any of them are particularly compelling to the point where I had an anchor for How Green Was My Valley. Instead, I was kind of fighting for my life to stay awake for the 2 hours of the film, to which end I actually did not. So I had to rewind at one point. But I was not a fan of this film, really, at all.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think this film is totally serviceable. In my eyes, it is the epitome, not in terms of quality, but in terms of genericness of Hollywood cinema, of slice of life storytelling, of let's communicate some family values to our audience. It does service all those roles, and it's got the cinematography and the pacing and all this that makes it feel like from this era. It's very of the era, and for better and for worse, I do think it is pretty unique in comparison to the rest of the Best Picture winners we've gotten, which is a good and a bad thing. I don't necessarily think I would have given this film the highest award of the year if I had gotten the chance, but I have a lot of respect for it, and I find it fascinating, but I really didn't find it that interesting. Of course, you guys bring up the points of the characters being not very well established. Like they are the son and the dad and the mom and the priest, but they're not much more than that. And the context they're put in is interesting enough, but it's hard to ground yourself in the drama of this story when the characters aren't very unique. I think it's got some good qualities, but on the whole, it just falls apart because it doesn't have anything to latch onto in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the film, we talk about the character, the like having the individual characters and them working or not for you. For me, I kind of view it as like the whole. I look at it as a more not in a more holistic view, I guess, in terms of the film. To me, is about the valley and about the town, and we
Sure.
have the individual characters that play the bit parts in that. But at large, it's about this whole. What is this community like through the lens of one family? And while I like slice of life films, and I think that there are elements of that genre reflected in here, there are storylines that I do find a lot more compelling than others in the film. I think the whole idea of what's going on with the mine, the dad is like, he hates socialism, and even the thought of unionizing is really like against him, even when
To the point where 4 or 5 of your 20-plus-year-old sons are saying, no, Dad, maybe this isn't a good idea. And you're like, hey, you know what? Just get out of the house. No big deal. Just leave and never see me again.
Yeah, so I think that there are certain plot lines in the film that I would have really liked to dive into and really see how that plays out in the interactions in the family, in the interactions of the village. And there are other plot lines like Hugh's sickness that are less compelling. Like Abram says, really does feel like a Dickens thing, like especially when he's like, I'm reading my books in the windowsill for a year.
And he literally plays with a couple little birds that land on his windowsill. Yeah.
He turns into Snow White.
Those are the elements where I think the film is weaker. And so, by and large, I'm kind of in the middle on it. There are elements that I like, and there are elements that I don't like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think really for me, what it come down to, I'm pulling threads from all of us, and we're kind of all in the same place by and large. I think the problem is not that there isn't the potential for an interesting story here. A mining town, unionization, a romance, a troubled childhood. These could be interesting stories, but because it is unfocused on the whole, and as Timo said, sort of tries to give you a general concept of the dynamic of this town, none of the plot lines are really pulled through all the way. The union thing kind of dissipates as you focus on Hugh's sickness.
It's kind
Hugh's
of like
sickness
solved
just-
in the background, sort of.
Exactly.
Even?
Yeah. That's the issue.
And then the other more interesting plot, the romance between Angharad and Mr. Griffith. It could be a totally serviceable romance plot, but that's also backgrounded as Angharad marries someone else and is moved away, and that drama isn't really rekindled. These possibly interesting storylines are dropped in favor of another one that is sometimes less interesting, sometimes more interesting, but always inconsistent.
Yeah. I think what I'd like to start out. I'd like to start out a bit more positive and talk about the threads of the story, the pieces of this mosaic that the film tries to paint that I liked, but the ones that I like the most, and those are, of course, the ones that it starts out on. The Union story I thought was very interesting and really set a bar that I thought this movie was going to live up to, that it slowly creeped away from. But yeah, I like the tension between how many Morgan brothers are there? Tucker and I were talking about it, and it fluctuated anywhere from like 4 to 12. I think there are only like 4 or 5 of them, not including Hugh.
Yeah, so
there are 5
It's
of them.
Hugh. He has a sister and 5 brothers.
Okay. But yeah, the
Big ass Welsh family.
exactly. The whole tension between the brothers and the father, and them getting kicked out, and the father being stuck in his old ways of, socialism is the devil's work, so say I. And then the boys have to gather this town meeting on the hill, and their mother shows up and says, all you guys that because the town basically turns against the father Morgan as well, because he's like the only member of the community that's sitting out of this union. And I thought that was a interesting thing that unfortunately does get dropped again.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, because I think that it more sets the tenor for a film that we don't end up watching, really.
Right.
Because it's not clear that this is going to become one plot thread. It seems obvious that this is the movie, and I think it is the interesting narrative to tell, especially in the context of a town that seems to very much view child labor in a coal mine as idyllic.
To a certain extent, yeah.
It seems like there's more to unpack there about the culture of work, and then the culture of these values that are considered to be socialist with the unionization. And when those tensions come to a head, I agree. I think the film is quite compelling, but I think they come to a head like 3 times, and it's within the first hour of the film before we transition into it being a coming of age story for Hugh or something. And because of that, it does feel like we're seeing, sure, many facets of the Valley as a place, opposed to just a study on a character or a theme. But it doesn't feel like a very complete one. It feels like we shifted from one track to the other, and the other isn't quite as compelling as the former.
Yeah, I think that part of that is moving into Hugh as our main character, because Hugh, as a little boy, really doesn't have like as much to do in the film as the father does. The father, it's never really said anywhere in the film, but I get the feeling that he is not just the patriarch of his family, but almost of the whole village. Like he is kind of
highly respected member of the
one of the upstanding members of society, and people look to him
just like us.
Yeah,
Exactly.
people look to him for their guidance. And so then when the story kind of takes this other direction and goes into looking at Hugh's life, and Hugh, in I guess realizing and seeing the Valley turn away from being green, which is I guess the central thematic idea and like thematic plot of the film. Yeah. It is less interesting, I think, because like simultaneously like more stuff happens, but it's not, I don't know, it's like feels like less things happen when Hugh is like the focus of the film.
Yeah, it's interesting that he becomes the focus, because I personally see almost the entire film as the focus on him. His father has a few good moments with the family and relation to the community, and Mr. Griffith also has a couple good moments. Like they're kind of a trifecta, but Hugh is for me obviously the focal point, because while we're in our mindset as the movie starts that, okay, this is going to be about unionization, it's going to be work and the problems of capitalism and stuff like that. Obviously, that's not played out. That's not the movie we get. And what instead is focusing on the theme of innocence and the loss of innocence and family and these sort of generalized topics that are supposed to give us a moral to latch on to and see hope in a better day. But you're right that Hugh kind of he's a lot like Oliver Twist in Oliver, which you watched earlier. He's a football to be passed around. He doesn't have a lot of agency in his own story, and of course he's a kid. It's tough to give him real agency in this. And while I do find the idea of him being sort of the hope for his family because he's going to be educated, but then he's been so indoctrinated by his community to want the values of hard work and being in the cold because that's what everyone in his family did, that plot line isn't given enough unpacking and like drama to feel like it lives up to the possibility of the unionization and coal mining and industry storyline. Like, I think there's another telling of this where Hugh is the main character still, and you're able to get a really heartfelt and impactful drama about child labor and about him losing this innocence. But then his father dies and the movie ends, and that seems like the crisis point 2/3 of the way through a film. Like there should be more here that gives us time to learn more about how this is impacting Hugh, but we don't. And it ends on a hopeful thing, like a montage of his family members skipping around the fields. It's like, wait, hold on. This doesn't necessarily track with the theme that you've set up, and it really undercuts the value of the story that you were building.
I think that last bit is like a retrospective. He's like,
Exactly.
I have to work in the coal mines now. Oh, wasn't it so great when we could just walk around the hills? And that's at least how I saw the ending bit there.
I think that the problem is, Hugh is boring and stupid, and he doesn't do anything fun other than when he gets into a boxing match, which I thought was kind of cool. But the problem with Hugh is that we have to cut back to whatever the hell woman we were talking about before, Mr. Griffith, for their plot line of some consequence, right?
Angharad is his sister.
Angharad, yeah, man.
Who marries the son of the owner of the coal mine and then moves to South America or whatever, and then comes
South
back
Africa.
and lives in a big house.
Wrong continent, dude.
Sorry.
The problem
South
is
Africa's not a
that
continent.
we have to juggle all this other shit in the background, because I actually think that the plot begins to catch up with its own momentum a little bit more when Hugh decides, you know what, actually, I'm going to not be a doctor. I'm not gonna be Dr. Morgan. I am gonna go to the coal mines. And then there's a tension with the father right there of, God damn it, my son almost made it out, but this town is kind of keeping him trapped. But that's never really unpacked.
And his mother. That's an interesting thing. His mom being very opposite of what the dad. That I want him to be educated. And his mom's like, no, this is ridiculous. Holes in bathtubs and arithmetic. That's ridiculous.
Math is stupid.
My son is getting
Mrs. Morgan.
Yeah, amen.
She wants the boys at home because they're trying to, draw on the map. Here's where your sons are. She's like, no, my sons are here. They're home. I don't need a map to see that, right? But there's no time to deal with any of this stuff because we had to go to school and have boxing matches, and we had to have some kind of unrequited love triangle with a preacher. We had to do all of this stuff, right? Because I do think the film actually, like I said, picks back up and then ends very suddenly. Yeah. Even more suddenly for me because I slept through about 20 minutes of it and woke up to yet another mine explosion, which I had to then do a little bit of catching up to. But it is a weirdly paced film because I do not think that its idea of analyzing the town as a collective is as useful as analyzing the town through the lens of Hugh, which is what the film should have done.
I think what we can tie this issue back to, if I can sort of make a hypothesis here, is the fact that this film is based on a novel by Richard Llewellyn, I believe is how you pronounce that last name. And I can definitely see how this multifaceted, sort of all-encompassing, we spend a couple chapters with Hugh, and we spend a couple chapters with Angharad and Mr. Griffith, and we spend a couple chapters with the Union Boys and stuff like that. I can see how that would work out if in a 800-page novel or something like that. But when you're doing writing a novel and writing a film are very different, and I feel like they sort of missed a cue by trying to get all those notes into this film adaptation when they really just should have nailed down one solid narrative to follow.
Thinking about I didn't actually know that the film was adapted from a book, but I did have my suspicions because the film opens and there's a lot of voiceover in the first part. There's not really that many lines of dialogue in the first third of the film, it feels like, and there's a lot of voiceover coming from seemingly adult Hugh. And so I was like, oh, okay. I bet this is based on a book because how do you bring in these like florid, like very fancy turn of phrase in a film that is that comes traditionally from books without doing it in voiceover? And so I was like, okay, that's going on. And I didn't hate the voiceover. I was like, okay, this is kind of...
That's fine.
Yeah. I mean, there are plenty of examples of bad voiceover, and I don't think that this was one of them.
Yeah. Another aspect, I said I wanted to bring up my two favorite sort of parts of this movie. I also like the boxing bit at the school. I think that's probably the most engaging. I love that they do the old timey
stance. Yeah,
I love they do the old timey boxing stance. But yeah, I think it is probably the most engaging part of the coming of age story because you have Hugh's rivalry with this boy in his class and also the teacher, and he has maybe love interest in the girl in his class. I'm sure that might be fleshed out more in the book, but she gives him a handkerchief to bite down on. The girl gives him the handkerchief to bite down on.
I know, I'm aware, but I remember that, but I didn't see that as a romance thing, more as one of his classmates taking some sort of pity on him.
Well, I think there's also the thing earlier when he first shows up to class that she sort of looks back at the boy that's teasing him. So I thought that was planting a seed of something, which is a lot of what this film does. It seems like it's planting a seed of something, and then it doesn't go anywhere.
Tanner, boys and girls can help each other avoid systemic physical abuse without being in a relationship, Tanner.
Well, not in a movie they can't. Not in a movie they can't.
Also 8, so I don't know. I don't want to pursue romantic interest for 8-year-olds.
It's cute. It's fine. But what I was going to say was, what's his Baidondo? I'm pretty sure his name is. He's my favorite character in the whole film. Just this blisteringly Welsh guy who shows up from across the street and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'll teach you how to fight, boy." And he has his bearded friend with him who's like, "We'll take some tea." Or the boy's training. He can't have tea. and they show up to beat up the teacher, which I thought was
Oh,
funny.
that's a really funny scene. That was a
You guys
really
really
funny scene.
messed that guy up. He's
punched
on the
him,
ground,
and he's like-
sprawled out. His head is like up against the wall. It's like
It looks like
that's
he's
serious
dead.
brain damage.
I thought they immediately killed him with the
With
way
one
his,
punch.
the way his neck was positioned on that wall. I turned to Duck and I'm like, holy shit, he's dead. But no, it turns out to be it's a funny little sequence. They don't kill him; they just beat him up severely in front of a bunch of children who he abused. So I'd say he deserves it.
That is
What's
a good
interest-
scene, I think.
Yeah, I do
What's
like that
interesting
scene.
about that, Tanner, and it actually ties into what Timo was saying before, is when the narration began, my assumption was that we were going to be spending maybe a third of the film's runtime with child Hugh, and then we're
Yeah.
going to see adult Hugh off in America or wherever, and then he comes back to the valley, right?
Yeah.
And we see the effects of either the union's existence or lack of existence, the way that's changed the culture or whatever. Because the sort of narrative frame at the beginning implies a retrospection that we never get because Hugh
Right.
never gets older.
No.
And so even when we're getting into like the educational stuff, it's like, oh, okay, so we're not going to be with adult Hugh for a long time, but we're setting the seeds of how he ended up diverging from his family.
Yes.
Of course, it doesn't happen either. And again, yeah, it probably does happen in the book. But the thing about an adaptation is that if you want to do it correctly, I think you got to do what Cary Fukunaga did, the director of 2021's second best film, No Time to Die, in his adaptation of Jane Eyre, which is take this sprawling text and find your own avenue into it. Tell a narrative that can feel complete within a thematic runtime.
Yeah, exactly.
And become a complementary work to
Sure.
the text. The ways that the best film of 2021, Dune, did. Right? And I just don't feel like this really navigated that at all. It ends up feeling like, yeah, this is the first half of a film, but it's not. It's the whole film.
Well,
Yeah.
funny enough that you say that because the first bit of trivia that I have here is that Tucker, can you remind me of the producer's name? I didn't have his name written down here.
Zanuck.
Daryl
Daryl
F.
F.
Zanuck.
Zanuck. Yeah.
Intended this movie to be a 4-hour epic, a la Gone with the Wind.
Yeah.
So
and it might have honestly worked more for the presumed
The story,
story
yeah.
that exists in the book.
Yeah.
Obviously, none of us have read it, so we can't confirm nor deny if that actually is
if
the
you've read
case.
the book,
Although I do
leave
know
a comment. Yeah.
that there are multiple book sequels.
Really?
This is a franchise.
Oh.
I'm not
saga.
joking. I saw that in passing on a because I
Oh,
actually
sure.
opened the book Wikipedia page instead of the film.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really interesting that we're talking about all these things and the plot points that aren't really dropped and sort of the pervasive tone of this film and why I do think that it is still pretty revered. A lot of people really like this movie. Is because it is a very charming film. It has its own specific tone of relaxed nature and meandering and introducing things and letting them fade away that I can see working for people. And I so I don't necessarily want to tear the film completely asunder
Right,
because I do
yeah.
recognize that aspect. Though those charming moments and the tone of Welsh miners singing their songs as they're heading to the mines and bathing together and all that kind of stuff is fun, but because it isn't grounded in more compelling characters and a more compelling core narrative, it's hard to say that charming tone pulls the film along all by itself.
Yeah.
The charm is kind of frill-ish on the outside of like the core or the cabinet. If you're gonna, the little doily things you hang on your cabinets, that's what it all kind of.
No, I'm sorry, I don't hang doilies on my cabinet, Timo. I'm not 85.
If you were a real fan of How Green Was My Valley, you would be 85 and you would hang doilies on your cabinets.
But what I was saying was just
sorry.
like it's this kind of external stuff, and I like all the Welshisms. Maybe if they're not like I don't think they're super accurate, but like they speak in weird, not exactly like standard English turn of phrase, and they all have their singing thing, and they sing, and it sounds nice in the film. So those
Like when the mom tells her husband to go and scratch, boy. She says that like 4 times. Interesting phrase. They're also ending all their sentences with is it or it is, one of the two. And it's like, okay, what does that actually translate to? Like, is that kind of an in it thing for modern British speak? Like, it's hard to tell, but it does give it its own flavor because they're they're not speaking like we do. And then, you know what? It's got a charm to it.
In a different universe, we have the streamer Tommy Is It.
That's a really specific reference.
Yeah.
It'll really land with the demographic of Quest for the Bestest. Sorry to all of our less Twitch streamer inclined watchers.
Sorry to everybody watching this How Green Is My Valley review over the age of 9.
Oh, God. But I think really the point I was trying to make when I brought that up is that I know that this film is revered, and frankly, I have a tough time really pinning down why, other than this is something that people grew up with. They were more adapted to this kind of storytelling that wasn't as laser focused. It's very antithetical to modern filmmaking and storytelling, and it makes it kind of hard to grab onto for us. But as I was watched a bunch of How Green Was My Valley reviews in the last 24 hours, and I have never seen such fervent comment sections of people just tearing people asunder for not liking How Green Was My Valley.
Is that a sign for things to come in the comment section of this video?
Could be. And if you're one of those people and watching this, I really hope that our retrospective been a little more, nailed down with themes and characters and plot progression and stuff like that. But at least comment, give us views. I would love to wake up and have this have like 64,000
negative
views.
comments still count for engagement, so leave them if you want.
Here's my thing.
Okay,
I don't really care if this movie's reviewed because I still think it's boring, and this is kind of the thing I feel like I've been beating around personally. It's like,
sure,
I just think that the film is not very cohesive. Mm-hmm. I don't really find it antithetical to any kind of like modern lens into a narrative like this. I just find it to be not a particularly well constructed film, frankly, because again, I don't think, going back to what Timo said centrally, if the valley is the character, I feel like I don't know the valley very well. And I also feel like I know the characters very well, because if you gave me a lineup of all these people, I could pin Hugh and I could pin Griffith and I could pin the dad and the mom, but it just feels like it's just this intermingling of people, but not really feels effective.
And Davin and
who's
Bronwyn?
the one? What about the really tall one? What's his name? He's got the one really tall brother.
Yeah, this is the problem. Like there are 2 character deaths at the hands of a mine. But that doesn't end up... It's like, oh, Ivor is dead, so now Hugh is going to go be creepy to Bronwyn again. It's like... Yeah. They're trying to make this web of characters in a town, but it's not effective. Yeah. I think about... I'm a big Gilmore Girls fan. This is a true fact about me.
My girlfriend was just watching that this afternoon.
And I think the strength of a show like that is the location of Stars Hollow, and you get a feel for the town, but you get a feel for the town through the people that live in it, right? Mm-hmm. But everyone there they have a niche. When they show up, you remember them. Mm-hmm. So who is the by
one of them is Sean Gunn in Gilmore Girls.
That's a true fact. But who's a boxer? By Didio?
Oh, by Dondo, I think.
By Dondo.
By Dondo, I don't remember the name, but I don't remember anyone's name, so that's not a knock against him, but that's a memorable character. So is his friend who doesn't want to go down in the mine to find Mr. Morgan because he's a coward, but he'll hold the jacket. Like
hold your coat.
These are good moments, and even the more serious moments, like bringing back Hugh after school, and the brothers being like, "We will go literally fucking kill this guy if you want us to."
Oh yeah, that was great. I like
melt
that.
the flesh off his bone or something like insanely violent.
When we establish these characters in the town and we see the miners walking back and they're all singing their songs and everyone's going up and they're getting their money as though it's in the Force Awakens. You get your 3/4 portions, here's your 2 2/3 portions. Mm-hmm. But that is trapped in this movie where nobody is recognizable outside of these key moments, and I just think that is a major storytelling flaw.
Sure. Yeah. I can definitely see that.
I certainly agree.
I think I'm just really glumming onto these portions of the film that I quite frankly quite enjoyed, like the boxing thing, like the union thing, and I really wish they had been brought up further, and when I look back, I'll probably remember them fondly, and not much else about this film because that's just how it goes. But one thing I did want to bring up that might contribute to this film being well remembered is the direction and the cinematography, because I think
you're stealing my point, Tanner. You're stealing my point. I was just about to bring that up, but yeah, do
Timo,
talk about it.
I don't have a lot of detail to go into here, but I think this film has a number of very good-looking shots. There's one at the very beginning that's sort of, I think its hue is on like this very, it's like an 85-degree angle hill he's like standing on, and he's backlit, and there's beautiful lush green grass. I assume this film's in black and white. I assume it's lush and green.
gray grass.
And like him and his sister are
How
like
gray was my valley?
It's like they were singing their voices back, their names back and forth to each other. That was a good shot. Anytime that they show like the sloping town that goes all the way up to the coal mine that's billowing black smoke into the sky.
By the way, entire thing is a set built in California. They could
Yeah.
not film on location in Wales because there was a war happening.
Hey,
So
I've heard of that.
So they couldn't get over there, so they just built a Welsh village in California, and it looked great. That's a phenomenal set.
Hey, Tim, I'll hand it over to you in a second, but I do have a quick bit of trivia since Tucker brought up the production. It took 150 builders 6 months to construct that set.
That is
the
some
village
classical...
of the name that's really hard to pronounce and isn't spelled the way that it sounds
none of
like.
us have attempted it for a reason. Timo, go ahead though. Go
Yeah,
for it.
John Ford, famously a filmmaker who will refuse. John Ford will never talk about why he does anything in his films. He's like, do not ask me about my movies. Screw you. Like, he hates talking about that.
To this day.
To this day, he like literally
Can't get
will
a
not
word
do
out
it.
of him.
He's been pretty quiet lately.
Especially, yeah.
But I think that it's evident that he really knows what he's doing with the camera. I think that there are so many shots where it's this kind of, this film's from 41, so it's still not super early in Hollywood, like filmic language, but I think that a lot of the techniques that are used in this film actually set the precedent for like how you just make a movie. John Ford, the cameras are moving around, the sets are huge, and they move through them, and they have the opportunity to just, he puts the camera wherever he wants. He puts the camera in a lot of impossible spots where, like, logically, like, the camera could not fit, but it's there showing us this unique angle. And
My favorite one of those is the shot of Hugh pushing the minecart.
Yeah.
And it's on the minecart and traveling away. It's like, oh man. And he's got all the grime on his face and the light is glinting off the coal. Great shot. Great shot.
There's this great photography down in the mine, and I think a lot of the stuff in the church is really nice.
Yeah.
This would be an amazing film in color, though. I think this film would vastly improve by some color film process. But
Yeah.
what can you do? Tucker,
C'est la vie.
you talked about the set, and I really think the set is well, it goes kind of in line with my thesis on the film that the valley and the village are like the central characters. It feels in just the visual construction of it, not really, in this story thematic lens, but in how it like appears on film. It feels very complete, very realized, very realistic, and every time that the mine in the background is billowing smoke or is not when they're on strike, I think that's like I just love seeing that. I think that the showing of the industrialization in like this idyllic place is like a non-narrative theme of the film. They don't really ever talk about it, but it is visually conveyed quite a lot.
Yeah.
Sure. Abram, did you have anything to say about that? Otherwise, I'd like to roll into a little bit of trivia about what Timo and Tucker just talked about.
I think the set's neat.
Well, there you have it, folks.
Neat.
Timo, you brought it up. This film would be great in black and or not in black and white. It would be great in color, but they unfortunately could not do that because they decided to do it in black and white because the flowers are a different color in Southern California as opposed to Wales. That is an aspect of
dumbass
it.
reason.
Yeah.
Not gonna lie.
It's classical Hollywood. You can hire people in this time to just paint all the flowers the right color.
Individually get on their hands and knees with a little brush and
They would
paint
do
the
that.
petals.
They would do that.
Yeah.
You could do
Yeah.
that back then.
That just feels like such an unnecessary detail when, for me, now that you guys are like discussing the changes in dialogue for like original dialect, I really think this could take place just about anywhere because it has that old Hollywood quality of here's a story about like a foreign town, but it just like it feels very Americanized in the ways that people look and talk by merit of being a film from 1940. So like, the flowers look different. John, I think it's going to be all right, you know? But
I think we'll live.
You guys
know?
built an entire village. I think that's enough work. You can get away with it being slightly different colored flowers.
But yeah, well, I had another piece of trivia about John Ford as a director here, Timo. I did not know about the thing that he would never talk about how he did things in his film.
There are some interviews, like filmed interviews, where some intrepid film journalist, media journalist tries to ask him, and he just will it's hilarious. He will deflect. He will do anything but talk about his films.
But another bit of John Ford trivia here. He apparently cut almost this entire film in camera. Almost every shot he took wound up in the edited film, and he rarely shot more than 3 takes of the same scene.
Wow.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, this is
Very
early
different
in his
style of filmmaking.
Yeah.
early in his career, so it's not like, even though he did build a village, I don't know the exact budget of the film, but it definitely.
I saw it as I think it was 800,000.
Okay, so that's some good money for 1941. So he could have, but if I'm on set and we're moving along doing 3 takes per shot, I'm happy. That's a good way to make a movie.
But speaking of John Ford, he did win Best Director for this film. Going into the other wins and noms here, Donald Crisp won Best Actor in a Supporting Role. Tucker, do you know what character Donald Crisp played?
Yeah, he's Mr. Gwillem Morgan. He's the dad.
Oh, okay. He's the dad. Okay, great.
Yeah.
It also won Best Cinematography, Black and White. It won Best Best Set Direction for Black and White film. It was nominated for Best Actress in a Supporting Role for Sarah Allgood, who I assume is Angharad?
Beth Morgan. No, she's
Beth.
the mom.
Okay. Oh, she's the mom. Okay.
Maureen O'Hara is Ingharad.
Okay. Well, she did not get nominated, but it was also nominated for Best Screenplay, Best Sound, Best Film Editing, and Best Score.
Mm-hmm. And I want to clarify something a little bit so we don't get... I'm actually in the comments. This was not early on in John Ford's career. He'd been a director for like 20-something years before this. Wow. But he continued to make films for another 20, so that's, there was a lot of time left in his career, but it wasn't early in his career.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for the correction, Tucker.
Do you guys have anything else that you'd like to bring up about this film?
The singing, you said that that it was nominated for Best Sound. I thought the singing in a film that's of this time period, sometimes the sound is a little not great. I thought it was quite good. I thought the mixing of the film for this age, not even for this age, I thought it was really well mixed, and I just liked the quality. I don't know. This is sound nerd me coming out, but the analog tape quality of the choir, of the all men's choir, is really nice. Very warm, and contributed a lot to this homely feel. And it was just one other unique item about the village that characterized it a little bit more, even though, as we talked about, maybe not as enough.
One last bit of trivia, because it is about the main character of the film as we come to understand him, Hugh. Roddy McDowall had only been in the United States for 2 weeks before being cast in the lead role for this film. He had been evacuated from the UK with his mother and sister to keep out of harm's way when the Blitz was happening.
Wow, and then
Probably worked out for him.
And he would go on to star in other films, such as one of the Planet of the Apes sequels.
Interesting.
One of the original Planet of the Apes sequels. Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, believe it or not, he was not in
like
Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
No, he was just not. I'm mistaken. I just pulled it up. He's in many Planet of the Apes sequels because he was in the original. He was Cornelius, one of the main apes in Planet of the Apes. Yeah.
Well, how about that?
It's a fucking monkey.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we're going to give this a score, so I think I just kind of sum this up to say that I think this is a well-made film in some respects, but like Abram talked about, the writing for the film really just doesn't match for a character narrative that we care about, like being Hugh, or if it's about the valley, we don't get a good sense of the valley. I think it is just sort of misguided in its writing, but is very well made in various other elements. Yeah, regards. Thank you, Tucker.
And of course, the classic thing about How Green Was My Valley is that it beat Citizen Kane for Best Picture.
Yep.
Which is just a fun bit of history. Doesn't it means something? But I like Citizen Kane stuff. I definitely would want it over Best Picture of this. But
yeah. For sure. For sure.
Citizen Kane is better than this, but neither are, I don't know. Wow. I think Citizen Kane is fine.
Citizen Kane, it's fine.
I get it. Orson.
Yeah.
It's your
what-
first film ever, dude. Come on, man.
Abram,
Nobody
which
expects
is-
to win on their first time.
Abram, which is better, Mank or Citizen Kane? The ultimate question.
Here's my honest answer. I remember more of Mank, but I cannot in good conscience say that that's right.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right.
All right, boys.
Should we
Shall we?
meander our way back down the valley into ranking time?
Yeah,
Let's do
Let's
it.
find out how average score the valley is.
Yes.
Nice.
As our final question, how green on this day is your valleys, Backlog Boys?
I'd give this. I think my score will reflect how green my valley is.
No, I'm not talking about the movie. I'm talking about your place. You know, your being.
Oh,
right
my
now.
place in life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Your valley.
I'm gonna see Moonfall tonight, so
I'm gonna see Jackass Forever tonight and Moonfall tonight. I'm seeing both of them.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm gonna see West Side Story this weekend.
Wow.
But my valley, to answer your question, Timo, is covered in 30 inches of snow. So.
Ooh,
Oh, ouch.
not very green.
Let's give this film a score.
All right.
Timo derailed us with one of his classic non sequiturs.
Ha 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 ha. All right. Give us the score in 3, 2, 1. Wow. And there we
Look
go.
at this.
Across the board, actually, higher than I thought. The average score is 5.2, starting from the bottom. Abram gave it a 4.1. I gave it a 5.0. Tanner gave it a 5.6, and Tucker gave it a 6.1. So pretty, well, not 2-point spread. Not wide or close. And that's interesting. I did not expect those points coming out from you, Tucker, or Tanner, actually. A little surprising there.
I feel like I thought I pretty accurately described my opinions. That I thought it was charming and interesting and unique, and I enjoyed a lot of elements of it, but I didn't personally connect to me because I thought the character writing was weak. So it's a good film, but nothing special.
I thought you were gonna give it a 7.
Well, yeah, Tucker, why didn't you give it that particular score?
No, well, maybe because that's not the score I would give it.
Timo, where does this movie go in the list?
This movie is gonna go sandwiched in between Chariots of Fire and The English Patient.
That sounds about right.
Pretty.
Above and below which one?
It is sandwiched between. Chariots of Fire is gonna go above it, and the How Green Is My Valley will go at spot 52, replacing The English Patient. So, yeah, down.
There you go.
Kind of down there at the bottom, but there's many more films below it. That's
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, and many more to come, I'm sure.
Well, we will get some. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Tucker, you summed up my thoughts pretty well on this film. I think it's charming. I think there's elements that I really like, and I wasn't like bored, but I do think it's middle of the road. I think that's for me. It's a straight 5.0 because the needle just doesn't flip either way. It's got to ride it right along the ridge.
That's totally reasonable.
Yeah.
Any final comments from you two?
I would just say that this film is just a testament to me about how, personally, I need a script of real substance to motivate a narrative like this for me. While I think a lot of films can skate by on their aesthetics, for me, if you're going to try to tell a more, like, economically, socially minded, like village drama, then I need that to be the strongest element of the film. And if the production ends up on top, well, then that's great for the production, but that's, for me, a pretty big negative for the quality of the film. So I personally consider this to be a below average Best Picture winner, and if you want to address that with me, remember when you're writing your comment, my name is Tucker.
Yes, of course. My final thing is that village drama is my new favorite genre.
Isn't that a band name?
Village drama?
Village
No,
people.
Village. That's the one.
That's
Same
the
thing.
one. Oh boy.
All right, so normally we would go visit the god of random chance to figure out what film we're watching next. We go spin that wheel, hear our oh so sweet rhymes, but unfortunately, actually not unfortunately, it's the time of year for the Best Picture winners, the nominees to be announced
Quest
by
for the Best 2022 Oscars edition.
Yeah.
Yes.
Coming soon.
So
Our second
next
annual.
episode, we will be talking about one of the nominees. When this episode airs, the results will not be out, and so we don't know which film that is going to be, but coming up, we're going to be talking about one of them nominees, and we will be spending the next couple weeks, about a month, I think. Well, more than a month.
More than a month.
2022 films. We're going to talk about all of them, all of the nominees. We're going to give our ranking of them separate from our list, and then whatever one ends up winning, the gods of the Academy, otherwise known as the voters, will pick for us which film gets to go on the list, and then we'll get to talk about that. So, well, there's no random spin wheel this week. There's plenty of chance up in the air. The gods of chance have not deserted us. And we'll be back next time to talk about some film from this most recent year. And I do hope you join us. Good discussion on How Green Was My Valley. Kind of a wrap up on this period of the year when we don't have Oscar films to talk about, more recent ones. And so we'll be moving into our new era for a little while. And
better than ending on Tom Jones last year.
Yeah, I agree. Better than ending on Tom Jones.
There you go.
But after Oscar, we'll be blossoming from our cocoon into new men, ready to break back into the quest for the bestest. But first, it's Oscar season, baby.
So if yes, Abram.
If you're like me and you don't like the Oscars and you wish that we could just not have to deal with any of this horse shit, don't worry. We're not going to spend the next 10 weeks watching a nominee every week because we are sick bastards. And if you were here last year, you would know that we were going to knock these puppies out a couple of weeks. You're going to get a lot of quests soon.
Yeah.
Before we get to that winner.
The series of nominees will be done before the Oscars ceremony when the winner is announced.
Yep.
We are gluttons for your punishment and your enjoyment. So we will be reviewing each of the 10 before the winner is announced.
Yep. So hope you are looking forward to that as much as I am. I can't wait to find out what films are going to be in the slate for 2022. And as always, we'll be there to review them, to give our thoughts, because I'm sure we're going to have quite very many. If maybe Abram's discussion of his top 2 films of this last year were anything in this episode, we'll be there to talk about it. Thanks for joining me on How Green Was My Valley. We'll be back next week with Best Picture nominee number 1. Peace.